For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Our top story takes us to Brazil, where authorities are preparing for what many expect will be the largest voter turnout in the country's electoral history this Sunday. That's when over 142 million people are expected to cast their vote in the country's presidential elections. In efforts to ensure a smooth electoral process, the Superior Electoral Court has tripled the number of volunteers working at polling stations around the country. 3.5 million assistants will oversee the elections. Compare that to just over 400,000 workers who volunteered in the previous election. The cost of campaigns for presidential candidates in Brazil has grown exponentially over the past 20 years. In 1994, the total campaign budgets were about $77 million. This year's costs are expected at $370 million. For more, here's our correspondent covering the elections in Brazil, Stephanie Kennedy. Hey, Stephanie.
Hello, yes, well, we bring you this report from the center of Rio. Quite a different scenario to the places we visited this morning and yesterday, which were Copacabana and Lapa. Now, just as there is a difference here in the atmosphere, it's a bustling hub, we've also seen a difference in the political campaign. Whereas yesterday in Copacabana, which is a wealthier area, we saw a lot of posters of the right-wing candidates. Here in the center, we're seeing pictures of Dilma everywhere. So obviously there is a lot of support, and that support is related to wealth and different sectors of the city. Today we met militants from the Workers' Party who told us the importance of the PT for Brazil and its reduction of poverty. I'd like to show you this report we made earlier. With only a few days remaining before Brazil goes to the ballot box, the PT, or Workers' Party, currently in power and led by President Dilma Rousseff, has based their political campaign on the success of their social programs.
In
the last 12 years, we have made some significant advances which have changed the reality of Brazil. We can see some fantastic results in the fights against poverty, social inequality. Recently, even the United Nations, for the first time, took Brazil off the world map of poverty. The Workers' Party hopes to bring with their next government political reforms that will challenge the corporate media groups, powerful families who dictate the headlines according to the interests of the private sector. Communication in Brazil is a strong oligopoly with considerable political influence and which acts in practice like the real political party of the right. Before this scenario, militants on the left hope that the governmental programs will speak for themselves.
Mais Médicos is a revolutionary health program that brings medicines and medical treatments to sectors of the population that do not have access to those treatments. So really it is revolutionary. But the people here see the media groups on the right speaking badly of the program, of which really there is nothing negative to condemn about it. It's quite the contrary. Although it is almost certain elections will go to a second round, the Workers' Party continues to lead in the polls. The participation of the electorate in Rio will have a decisive impact on the general voting tendencies. Stephanie Kennedy, Telesur, Rio.
And thanks to Stephanie, U.S. District Judge Thomas Griesa has declared Argentina in civil contempt of court. The ruling comes following the country's attempt to avoid his ruling demanding the country pay holdout creditors in full. Argentina maintains that Griesa has overstepped his jurisdiction by preventing U.S. banks from transferring payments. For more, we go to Buenos Aires and our correspondent, Leonel Poblete.
Top story in Argentina today. This country has been named in contempt of court by U.S. Judge Tomás Griesa. This happened at around 5 p.m. New York time. The announcement came after, it was very well reported in the media, the Vulture Fund holdouts are in a litigation process with Argentina, asking in person to Judge Tomás Griesa to name Argentina in contempt of court. Why? well, basically what they say is that Argentina has not abided to Judge Tomás Gries's ruling that Argentina has to pay the Vulture Fund creditors in full 100%. These two letters which I have here have been sent by the Argentine government, one to US Secretary of State John Kerry and the other one to Judge Tomás Gries himself, rejecting that this country it falls into the category of in contempt of court, saying that it is in international law prohibited that a country such as the US names another sovereign nation in contempt of court. Absolutely, according to Argentina, prohibited by international law. I thoroughly recommend, if you can get the English version, which is on the internet, of the letter sent by the Argentine government to John Kerry, as it gives a lot of background information and again explains why it is illegal for a nation such as the US to name another nation, a sovereign nation as Argentina, in contempt of court. Back to you.
And thanks to Leonel. At least 43 students are still missing after 3 buses were shot at by police in the central Mexican state of Guerrero. As our correspondent Clayton Kahn reports, the incident has led to strong criticisms of the Mexican government.
Thousands of students, along with their teachers and relatives, marched throughout the Mexican state of Guerrero yesterday to protest against a police assault last Friday night that left 6 people dead, 25 injured, and dozens disappeared. Original reports state that 58 students were missing, but in recent hours 14 have turned up, affirming that they were able to escape the attack. 3 busloads carrying students from the teacher training college Normal de Ayotzinapa were attacked by local police in the community of Iguala as the students were collecting funds for their school. Authorities argue that the buses were hijacked by the students. However, students affirm that the service was agreed upon with the drivers. 22 of the police involved have been detained for questioning. Many believe the attack is to prompt the closing of the Ayotzinapa College, known for its student activism and radical politics.
And thanks to Clayton, the country of Peru has been shaken by 2 earthquakes in the last 7 days and over 197 in the past year. From 1980 until 2010, the country was hit by over 110 quakes, which killed almost 17,000 people. The recent earthquake killed 8 people and injured dozens more. With more on Peru's deadly and destructive history with earthquakes, here's our correspondent Raya Mora.
We're in Mixca, the town that is closest to the epicenter of the recent earthquake. As you can see behind me, the damage is massive and none of the houses are inhabitable. The whole population has moved to a soccer field nearby, and they're waiting for a longer-term solution. Authorities are coming to town to make sure that nobody comes back, since the houses could collapse. And there was a series of replicas, the most recent one being at 6:30 a.m. Back to you.
Thanks. And thanks to Rael. The Venezuelan government has launched a campaign encouraging citizens to voluntarily disarm. Here's our correspondent Rachel Boothroyd with the details of that plan.
Over 50 firearms were handed over to the Venezuelan government within the first hour of its voluntary disarmament plan, with 72 different points set up around the country where citizens could anonymously hand over their weapons without legal repercussions.
The struggle to build peace is disarmament. It is the way forward.
In a country with one of the highest homicide levels in the region, the government estimates that civilians are in possession of at least 1 million illegal firearms. Ricardo Vargas, who handed over his handgun today, agrees that Venezuelans must come together in order to reduce the national rates of violent crime.
We believe that this is in order to halt violence. We really need to hand over our firearms.
The government offered a number of incentives to those who decided to hand over their firearms, including funding to set up social enterprises and laptops and scholarships to national universities. The voluntary disarmament campaign is just one element of a broader homeland security plan contemplated by the government.
We know that a guy who has committed a homicide isn't going to hand over his pistol just like that. But what we're doing is collecting all the firearms that we can on a voluntary basis in order to make sure they don't end up in the hands of armed criminals.
68% of homicides in the country currently carried out with firearms. The government has made ridding the country of guns a #1 priority. A battle which it says will require a profound change in Venezuela's culture. I'm Rachel Boothroyd for Telesur in Caracas, Venezuela.
And thanks to Rachel, Britain's Royal Air Force launched its first airstrikes in Iraq on Tuesday, destroying an Islamic State weapons arsenal located in the country's northwestern region. The airstrikes were launched to support Kurdish fighters against ISIS fighters. Prime Minister David Cameron secured parliamentary support for joining the U.S.-led airstrikes in Iraq. Cameron has agreed that U.S. officials that the strikes against ISIS could last years. A United Nations report released Tuesday reveals that over 160,000 Syrians have fled their homes into neighboring Turkey, fearing further U.S.-led airstrikes and the advance of Islamic State extremists. The UN also says that over 11 million people in Syria are still in dire need of humanitarian aid. Since the beginning of the conflict in May 2011, over 3 million Syrians have been displaced. 1.5 million fled to Turkey. More than 1 million are in Lebanon. At least 190 people have been killed. Afghanistan's new government has signed an agreement to keep 10,000 U.S. troops in the country until the year 2024. Under the agreement, U.S. troops are expected to leave by the end of 2016, but they are permitted to stay until 2024 and beyond. The pact will allow the U.S. to carry out counterterrorism operations in the country. The deal came a day after Afghan President Ashraf Ghani was inaugurated. We end on a lighter note. The best canine surfers gathered on Sunday for Huntington Beach's annual dog surfing competition. It's dubbed Surf City Surf Dog. More than 50 animals took part, classed by size and weight into different categories. One dog came all the way from Rio de Janeiro to participate in the event. Winners in each category also received a commemorative award. The event drew about 2,500 people and raised more than $6,000 for its nonprofit partners. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.